small showing.
Yes.
Two typos
Live TV
in the
tonight.
minutes.
You feel good?
Something like that, so they can't find out where witness protection.
No. Oh.
Sorry.
I was good, you spelled my name, so everybody does. 2-2 before it was here. Even my mother-in-law still does. That could be another reason.
Autocorrect doesn't catch that one. We're good.
Super mild passive aggressive disdain.
For some of the areas we
Oh, no, geez. Arkansas.
That means he's ready, right?
That means you're ready, yep. So whenever you're ready to go.
Okay, Tim. We're getting. Tim is doing.
Yeah.
do it.
Tim is Tim.
Hey, everyone, let's get started. So welcome everyone to the December 10th, 2018 special park board meeting. Just to clarify, we had to kind of jockey things around a little bit because of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and so we did want to get a meeting in before the end of the year, and this is it. So thanks for everybody showing up, and hope you had a chance to review a few things that were in the packet that was sent out. Basically, our agenda for this evening is covering the discussion about the dog park, and we're also going to have some discussion, actually informational about Bergsma Acquisition, and lastly, we're going to have some action regarding the Gilman Boulevard framework plan. I hope everybody had a chance to review the proposed letter in the packet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So with that, everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting in October. Does anybody have any questions, things needing corrected? If not, could we have a motion to approve those minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Did you second, Carl?
I'll second.
And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you. So next we're on to public comments. We actually have one person here from our community. Would you like to make a comment? Okay. So I guess we're moving right on to talking about the dog park.
Yeah, we'll hand it over to Jennifer Fink. We had a public meeting on the 28th of November that was a successful meeting, and chance to report out to all of you and have some discussion and get some feedback from you as we move forward. So, Jen.
Yeah, so hi, Jennifer Fink, Park Planner. I'm on November 28th, we had our second workshop with the public. We had about 15 attendees. Though it wasn't highly attended, we had some really fruitful conversation. And what I would like to do with you tonight is just kind of very quickly walk through the presentation. I will soon be updating the website and putting this presentation up there, as well as the site map of the preferred site. And we'll also, after I go through this presentation, we'll talk kind of about what our next steps are and how we're going to continue this process. So real quick, we just obviously did our welcome and agenda, but we talked about our phase 1 survey results. And what was really interesting is the number of people who currently use a dog park. Only 51% said yes, they do. The people who didn't were for various reasons. Either it was too far, they don't live near one, Fido died, they want to get a new dog, or they just didn't feel safe going to one in the area, or others were too far away. But really 48% really had no preference as to whether or not a dog park. So it was kind of a flat feedback as far as weighing that as far as importance. What type of access to a dog park is most important to you? Remember on this question, when asked if you walk, drive, or bike, it wasn't a popularity contest. You could answer more than one, so you can see walking and driving were the most important. Only 4% of the people thought they would bike there with their dog. So access to the park, a future dog off-leash facility was really important for both walking and driving. Would you prefer one larger dog park or multiple moderate-sized dog parks? Was pretty, again, flat as far as the survey responses. 41% said a larger dog park, 37% multiple or a moderate-sized dog park, and 21% no preference. Again, you could pick others at, whoops. Then the next question, what setting is appealing for a dog park? People said a wooded treat area, sunny area. 63% said a mix of both of those, and then 20% really had no preference at all. So we know people like the trees to get out of the sun, but they also like the sunshine on those nice days. What terrain is most appealing for a dog park? Again, kind of interesting responses. 30% said flat ground, 37% said a mix of both flat and sloped uneven ground, and 28% really had no preference. So a lot of dog parks we see are really just super, super flat, but it seems that, you know, some terrain and some interest would be in the site is also really important. One thing we heard very loudly at the first workshop that we had back in August, that was not part of the survey, online survey feedback, was this timing. This sense of urgency from people. How soon, when looking at all these different sites, the 8 sites we had looked at, how soon can we develop any one of these? And some of those, as we've been talking about, none of the sites are perfect. They all have their little isms, but this sense of urgency, what can we build in 2019, right? And so as we go through some of our future checklist here, you'll see how that kind of plays into that. Just as a recap, you know, the 8 sites that were part of the initial survey look were all on the valley floor. It was Muirwood Park, Sammamish Cove, Tibbetts Valley Park, Bernston Park, Gibson Park, Rainier Trail, the community center, which is the old skate park site, Inge Johnson Park, and Squaw Valley Park. So what we did when we took some of the survey feedback, and I'm sorry, this was in your packet. I'm sorry, it's a little hard to read on this screen here. But we went through the survey feedback received from the first round of engagement back in August and September, and looked at what was most favorable, less favorable, the approximate size of the dog park. We kind of heard from the community, size matters. You know that super small doesn't really get anything, but too big doesn't really offer anything. So there was like this 2-acre kind of sweet spot that people really talked about. Knowing other dog parks in the area, Robbinswood, Barton Park up in Issaquah Highlands, all have some of that same size. It really helped people kind of say, yeah, that's good. I can go there and have that kind of elbow room with my other neighbors when we're out there, knowing some of our sites were really restricted. We also looked at the geographic location. Are some of them more on the outer skirts of our boundaries? Were some a little more closer to the valley floor, or is it centrally located for people to get to, whether by bike, roads? We also looked at the setting as far as the survey results and added this and looking at all of the sites, what existing support facilities are there, and also what our restrictions were as far as any grants, deed, you know, is a conversion needed. Those also played into that timing and sense of urgency that we had heard from the meeting, so that we weighted as well as far as that timing readiness factor, and so that's what that last column is there. We also had 4 sites that came out of the public engagement that we felt warranted kind of running through this whole process. We didn't have some favorability scores on those because they came out of the public comment, but we ran through the size and the location and the rest of the criterion. And those sites were Confluence Park, Central Park, Pad 4, Talus. There's a small little city-owned parcel up there, as well as Park Point, which is open space area. So real quick, we went through the evaluation table at our workshop. This was in your packet again. We talked about what percent favorability, and kind of when looking at all of these criterion across the board, kind of get a sense of magnitude as to how easy something could be achieved or how challenged some spots might be. Red obviously is a little more difficult or less favorable. A yellow is more of a moderate or medium restriction, and then green is a little bit more easy. So if you think the, stoplight coloring on this. So the one site that came up as the most favorable, but also had the least concerns from the community, and that was Tibbetts Valley Park. And when we stretched that out across the approximate size of the dog park, geographic location, setting, existing facilities, grant deed restrictions, it really addresses that sense of readiness. There's a couple other sites that also, when running through the whole gamut, had some favorability, and those were Rainier Trail by the Issaquah Community Center, Tibbetts Valley Park, but Merewood Park and Gibson Park, while they also had some favorabilities, they also, as far as their favorable, less favorable, didn't rank very well. So during our public meeting, we had a nice discussion with the group. We talked through all of these sites. We did a breakout session where we asked people to review that evaluation table, see if they were seeing what we did, and we spent a little time walking through each of the sites and the survey results and see if they had similar thoughts to what we had seen as staff, and see if they had any other further discussion. So we had a really nice engaged discussion about the pros and cons of all these different sites, but we were able to come to consensus that Tibbetts Valley Park, after discussion, was the most readily the site that was most readily available for construction in next year, and there was an overall consensus from the 15 people at the meeting that that's the site to pursue. So tonight, we're just providing you an update. As a reminder, we're not asking for any park board action tonight. That will come in January. We're just giving an update on what happened at the meeting and kind of what our next steps are. So knowing after we had the roundtable discussion, we talked about how this site might be developed, right? We know from the research we did in 2015, the old survey packet that was also in your, or the research we had done that was in your packet, talked about all the different dog parks in the area and the different region, what elements they had that were good or maybe unique and stood out, and some of the basic elements that we'll find at each of these dog parks are, double gated access, fencing. We're going to have a small and a shy dog area. Those are some basic elements that no matter where we put a dog park, we're going to have, right? But we also wanted people to talk about what other elements they might like to see there, other potential amenities, obstacle courses, pathways, what type of material they would like to see, benches, dogway stations, drinking fountains, fire hydrants for dogs to lift their leg on, though they're non-working fire hydrants. A hose-off station, informational kiosk, pet licensing information, because Issaquah really has a high pet population but very low licensure numbers. So how can we, is that important to you to have that information readily available when you visit one of these sites? Natural features, logs, rocks for dogs to feel like they're king of the mountain, and also, trash receptacles, shelters, to kind of get people thinking about what are the options that we can put out there. We're not in the design mode yet. We will be coming out with ideas, but this was just to kind of stimulate the conversation, is to open up the ideas as to what could happen at a dog park site, and especially in this case, we were talking Tibbetts Valley Park. And so what we ended up doing was we created this, let me reduce this down here. Created this, yeah.
Jen, before we jump into the site, I'm just curious, as you heard Jen say, as we went through the checklist, maybe we can just draw that up again. I just want to open it up for discussion. As you heard Jen say, Tibbetts really, both in popularity from the survey, was the highest ranked, and then as we did this additional site due diligence, and really looked at readiness, that was favorable as well. Would love to know if any of you have questions or thoughts, comments.
Okay. I guess I'm curious about Tibbetts Valley and the existing parking that's available. During high season of sports season, all of those parking spots are full. It is hard to get a parking spot. So I'm curious, if we go forward with one site, is there an intent to increase parking or, maybe limit parking for dog parking in a particular section, just so that it's, I'm curious what, I guess, your thought process around that.
The timing and development of the site is really interesting. So yes, we will be addressing and looking at parking. We will also be looking at, there was a high survey response that people will be walking there, right? So how might we improve some of our pathways or signage or things to make sure that people can get there by walking, and maybe they park down a block and walk through the park to semi-tire the dog before you even get to the dog park. But we're also next year on our work plan looking at master planning Tibbetts Valley Park.
Yeah.
So collectively, parking is going to be looked at even a future bigger scale is how are we going to ensure that the needs of this park with its reimagination in the future, how is that going to be achieved? So we'll be looking at it both during the design process, but also as a part of the master plan going forward.
Yeah, we'll have to go through a permitting process to put the dog park on this site, so that'll be part of that. What are we doing in this near term? As Jim mentioned, there is that long-term reality of the master plan effort that's going to be happening at Tibbetts. Another thing that came out of the conversation on at the public workshop was a strong interest by the community to really focus on Tibbetts Valley Park as the off-leash dog park to build next year, but a keen interest from those that were there, and we want to put this out on the website to get feedback, but not forget or not lose sight of exploration of a future off-leash dog park, a second off-leash dog park as well. And as we heard that, and we certainly expressed, that that would be a second site that would go into our broader capital improvement plan discussions, how we prioritize that, when that might be, would need to be prioritized in context of all the other projects. But there was an interest in sort of hearing, and it echoes what we heard from the survey, right? I don't know that we could find one location for an off-leash dog park that feels close or convenient for the whole Issaquah community. I think just given traffic patterns, given just all the topography we have to work with as a community, so.
And then I guess, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I guess the other question was, I think it talks about existing parking and support facilities. They're kind of combined into the same one. I guess also, when you were considering the different choices, did you also consider, the opportunity to activate some of the parks that are currently underutilized, or was that seen as a negative? I just think about some of those parks that are in there that, like the Rainier Trail, it's very underutilized now.
Yeah, no, those were very much part of the discussion, both at the public meeting, the workshop, the survey we had, as well as this meeting in November. Because, some of those park spaces have some zoning hurdles or grant restrictions which keep them underperforming. Mm-hmm. So when we first had our meeting back in August, we talked about the difficult topic of, okay, if this is really a desirable site, what would it take to do a conversion on a grant or a funding source or something else? So we could activate this highly underutilized or underperforming park space. How can we then improve it, right? So at our meeting in August, we had that real honest conversation when looking at all of those 8 sites to see what we could do. And the nice thing, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, that's a great question, Susan, because and how you asked it, I think, is spot on, in that coming off the heels of the park plan, if you remember this there was a real interest, how do we activate some of these park spaces? So if anything, it was really seen as a plus, right? How do we consider it? But let's be pragmatic about that. And what we clearly heard, and we need to understand with a number of those sites, what it would take to activate them. There's multiple steps that need to happen, and that's not a 1-year effort. Some of those conversions. How do we consider with some of the sites that have those red dots, if this community, and it's a broader community conversation, or probably longer community conversation, that will come up, I think, as we start doing some other planning efforts, as we look at the Issaquah corridor master plan and some of those properties. What would it look like? What interest is there to activate those sites? Rainier Trail, interestingly enough, and what we're talking about there is really what was the skate park site, and activating that as a new way of off-leash. I think was seen as popular. The only downside was size. It would not create anything close to a 2-acre off-leash dog park. I think at most half-acre likely.
Carl?
Yeah, was there any concerns about, all the activities that are going on in Tibbetts other than the dog park that might interfere? And would access to the dog park be a separate access, or would people have to walk through the whole park to get to the dog park? We're just thinking about summertime activities, young kids
Yeah, let me pull
coming
up
in and
the
out,
GIS
and people with their
real quick.
dogs coming in and out, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think its proximity to the parking lot is a real positive. I think, and this is likely going to come up as part of the Tibbetts Valley Master Plan too.
So you have a
I
spot, you have a
think
location located already?
There's a location identified.
Yeah.
So it would not be taking away any current uses. This is a 2.5 acre spot that really has never really been activated. It's
Yeah.
very underutilized near the parking lot. Really an opportunity to activate that corner of Tibbetts Valley Park that really never has had. That edge has never really felt like it's part of the park. So a real opportunity to, in some ways, connect Tibbetts Valley Park to the Squawk Mountain community in a new way, in a different way.
So let me get in there real quick. So here's Tibbetts Valley Park, sorry. Let me satellite here. So here's the 12th Avenue, just to orient everybody, Newport Way, SR 900 over on the left here. So the area we're looking at for the dog park is this treed area here. And while it looks like it's heavily vegetated, there's a lot of nice sizable trees in the property, but there's also a lot of blackberries,
Yes.
which make it look like there's heavier cover than really is tree canopy.
Oh, it's more.
So when we get some of that invasive species cleared out of there, we'll be able to take a look and do some grading, some low rockeries to provide some flat areas or trail access to other areas. And it will actually be a really nice environment.
Is that still clearing out all that? Is that still considered a green for it? It had green all the way across, so they didn't dip down a little bit for how much it costs to clear that out at all, or is that not much of a cost?
Some of that we can do in-house with our park staff, and we've got the equipment to do it. We can also utilize volunteer efforts to do events like that and to do some cleanup. So, we'll have to see when we get there, actually what it's gonna take. But let me pull up, you've kind of segued. So this is where we're looking at. We'd utilize this parking area. To answer your question as far as mix of uses, you can have an access point here, but you can also have an access point off of 12th Avenue somewhere along this side, without even having to then touch the other sporting activities, which really isolates the dogs and the kids interacting so much. And let me pull up this other map here.
It
You
looks
can
like it's
see.
Look like it's pretty well flat too.
Yeah.
There's a grade.
So there
yeah,
is
you'll
a
see
grade,
there's the-
so as you go up 12th Avenue, that it's kind of a little bit of a hill. It's average about 8 to 10% slope up and down this entire site, which it's not super steep, but it's a grade. With some minor grading, we could certainly, this red on here is critical slope, so that steep slope area that we need to stay away from. This little knoll right here is actually, we found out, an old dirt pile that has now been vegetated because it's been abandoned. So we can grade that out and make some really neat flat areas in there. So we're ignoring that for the moment until we can get out there and do a little more recon on the field. But with that, you know, we have from this end up to this end about a 70-foot elevation gain, right? But we could also, you know, being just over 2 acres, do some really neat effect areas. We could make some flat areas. We could have stairs, or we could have pathways that take you down to other areas. You can have trees in there. So it's not gonna be your flat, open dog park like we so often see. There's gonna be some character to this. And it's really gonna be interesting to see what that transpires as part of the design process for that. But as far as master planning and the ability to get something built next year, this park in this little area is very doable. And talking with our permitting department and knowing what other restrictions there aren't on this property, which allow us to be able to do this next year, and really talks to that need and readiness for next year.
That's what I was gonna ask, because, you know, being on a skateboard park, which I thought was gonna be built within 2 years, and ended up being, you know, 4 or 5. Do you really think this is doable in 1 year? I mean, from past experiences and stuff?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, 'cause-
Much less intense construction.
yeah, there's not, yeah, you don't, it's not
Yeah.
like a skateboard park, but I mean, but still, I mean.
Yeah.
And
it's
this is-
something doable. I mean,
Yeah.
That's good.
And really, once you kind of get the grades set, you know, if you have some areas that you need to fence off while you seed it, or you put in some plantings, I mean, you can have small little areas to still do improvements in without really affecting. The big expenses are gonna be your fence and getting your boundaries set up, right? And your gates, and there's gonna be some concrete in areas. But as we get into the details of design, that will then inform the budget and what we need to do and what can get actually done next year. Prioritize the basics, right, to get us the fence, the entry gates, access points, accessible routes. And then if we need an obstacle course for agility training down the road, that could be a future phase.
I was curious, there used to be a home up there, and there was already a driveway and a path in, so I'm not sure if that would be the access point or not.
No, that's been demolished, and right now it's pretty much fair game as to wherever we feel access would be most desired. You know, because there is, and it's kind of hard to see on this map, but there is a road access right here. You know, there's an intersection. So it'll be more to come on that as we start the design process, but just wanted to let you know kind of what it was looking like and what it looks like in aerial format.
Jennifer, before you move away from that.
Yeah. Let me go back.
One of the comments that I've heard along the way has been that this piece of property has had some potential issues that maybe are unknown in terms of development. And at what point would that become clear that this would be acceptable, that there aren't some sort of, I don't know, landmines or who knows what in here that would prevent this from being a dog park? Would that come at the permit stage, or development comes out to take a look at it, or at what stage would they be able to say, no, this can't be done here because of these reasons, or yes, it can because we've looked at it and it's okay?
So that's something as we go through the permitting process. Right now, there's an existing master plan for Tibbetts Valley Park. It's somewhat old, hence why we're going to be updating it next year. In this little section here, they show some tennis courts and a few pathways through the site. We'll have to work with our permitting department to now introduce a different use, but as we also go into a new master plan update next year, you know, really all spaces are fair game, right? Baseball fields might change in their orientation or their layout, or they might move. Parking may be shifted down the road. I mean, we have some things to see. So development of a dog park is relatively easy to do. It could be a future phase, and it maybe ends up getting flipped with another area We don't know that yet. We'll go into it very eyes wide open as we develop this and also look at the master planning process for next year. But this is really a very suitable site. It has not had uses for 20-plus years. It's just been sitting there. And it is really able to be activated without much hindrance. And we'll work with our permitting department to, you know, address any hurdles that may come up or any unknowns.
I mean, that would come out fairly soon in the process, so
Yes.
that if for some reason there was an obstacle, we could go with Plan B fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, and we've had some initial meetings with planning, as we were evaluating all the sites, and certainly, nothing has come up to date, but yes, that would be something we, as the applicant,
Yep.
would want to be made aware of soon, promptly.
Mhm.
Yep.
So any other questions right now, or else I can start on kind of our next steps and what we'll be doing. So let me get back to the PowerPoint presentation here. So as I told you, we broke out and talked through that site a little bit. We also spoke of the formation of a friends group, and all 15 attendees who were there were very interested in being part of that. This group will help foster the future dog park, and it's our hope they will help us in, you know, creation and completion of the dog park, not only in building it, but the ongoing stewardship of that group. So there's some great interest. As we continue moving forward through the design process, we'll also want to encourage that group. We'll have to have some boundary separation between that group and the city as far as what our roles are, but that's yet to be seen, and obviously more conversation will come forward. But very interested, a lot of people wanting to be part of that, which is heartwarming. And too, if anyone wants to be part of our communication list, they can email me and I'll get you on that list and go from there. As far as next steps, we're doing our informational update with you, the park board, this evening. At your January 28th meeting, we will be asking for official site recommendation based upon this feedback. In early January, Jeff and I are gonna plug a couple days and just go out and meet at the site. Invite people to come on out, walk the property with us. We're doing some minor clearing to be able to safely walk through the paths up and down the site. And just come take a look. We're gonna be hanging out here for a couple hours. Come walk the site with us, give us your feedback. And then too, after the first of the year, we'll be kicking off that friends group again as well.
Can I add one thing, Jen, real
Please.
quick? So, as you see with that schedule, by what we would anticipate between now and the 28th, along with these site visits and a chance for, to get more feedback both from the website and just from residents who want to come out and see the site with us. We'll also begin doing some of that initial work with development services, with the planning folks. So by the time we come on the 28th, seeking that recommendation, we're aware of any scenarios that would make this more difficult than what has initially been described to us as a doable site. So lets us kick those tires a little bit more.
Yeah. So then steps in 2019 we'll be taking, you know, obviously we'll be working with our development services, as Jeff just said, and we'll be working through site design, which will also have a public engagement component. We'll obtain any necessary permits. We'll also be working on engaging that friends group. And then we'll do construction, and we'll phase it as budget and allows, and volunteer efforts. You know, this is something that, depending upon how much volunteer effort we get, can really make a difference as to how far the dollars stretch. So we'll see where that goes next year, more to come. And then too, we'll be providing informational updates to both you and City Council as needed along the way next year.
Is there any money allocated for any of this at this time, or will that be
Yes.
reported to the council?
Yep, so council adopted the budget on December 3rd for next year. So that's great news, and there is $200,000 allocated for construction of a dog park next year.
Yep.
So, yeah. So we have funds to get this done. You know, some of the things that could end up really taken a lot out of the budget, again, a little early, but like a water meter. If we need a new water meter for something, that can be a $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 element, you know, if we're putting in a dog wash station or something, a little more expensive, you know. But just, those are some of the big items that could hit. But otherwise, it's a very doable budget for the site and what needs to get done. So we're really excited about it.
Jen, one thing that I would suggest, we've talked about it before, would be once we get to the amenities phase, I guess, in terms of, you know, so many of those look terrific.
Yep.
It'd be nice to have them all, but, you know, that's not possible.
Yep.
It'd be nice to really get some sort of a cost range for each one of them, so that when we get together to, actually even the community to make recommendations, it'd be nice
Yep.
to really, this is how much we have to work with within that budget, which of these would take priority, and the only way to know that is to have a cost range.
But too, it's also one of those that early in the process, you know, you don't want to also hinder yourself as well. If there's a will, there's a way. You know, if you're wanting something that could be phased in a future grant opportunity, it's also your time to think big. So while you want to be cognizant of your budget, you also don't want to hinder your thinking and what that future really should be. And there's ways and steps to get us there when it comes to grant funding, budgeting, seeking partners. You never know what can happen. So you want to think big, but you want to do practical, right? And as to what is within your budget. So any other questions regarding dog park? As far as next steps, also what's not up here, I'm going to be updating the webpage, which is issaquah.gov/dogpark, with all of this information from our meeting. Also, if other people have questions, thoughts, they can email me. We'll also be posting here in a few weeks what those walk dates are in January for site visits. So that'll be where we update our information, and I'll also be sending out information to the park board or the dog park interested parties as well. So.
Any other questions, comments on this? I think the main thing for the board to be aware of is if there's issues that come up from now till the end of January, now's the time to flush them out, because on the 28th, we want to vote for a recommendation, and that's not the good time for any surprises at that time, so it'd be good to get it out in the open now.
One question I had was, it's obvious that Tibbet came out number one. It looked at those dots and trying to balance the red dots. It looks like Rainier Trail was second. Okay, so that might be
Plan B is what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, the one trade-off for that site is size of the park.
The thing that's nice though is you've got the trail there, so you can kind of combine leash, then,
Yeah.
It's already kind of like a dog park,
yeah, kind of is actually.
so you know.
That's great, we've got a couple of those type of sites and locations.
And so with the Tibbet's kind of master planning that's taking place, how do you think about this? Is this like a 5 to 10 years, and we think like this is gonna, like dog park is something we can get up and running short term, and then we go through the master planning, and then it's kind of the last portion of the development if we decide there's something else to use that for, or is this essentially kind of the kickoff of the master plan? We say like the dog, at least the dog park section of Tibbet's would be kind of the starting place, and then we look at what we do with the rest of the.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right, the sequencing is what it is. I think this is, in some ways, sort of kicking off the activation of Tibbetts Valley Park in a slightly different way. I would say that this investment probably does have a minimum 5 to 10 or longer year. When you look at the process of a master plan, then funding capital improvements, it's likely phased capital improvements for a park of that size, right? We could end up through that process realizing, I mean, given sort of the isolated nature of this site, if you're familiar with it or you see that steep slope area, it could end up being, hey, that's a great location long-term for the off-leash dog park as well. So at a minimum, 5 to 10 could ultimately be the long-term site or space for it as well. I think what's interesting, and this even came up in our discussion in regards to the dog park at Tibbetts, it certainly came up, if you recall, with our park strategic plan feedback we got about Tibbetts, and it's this, that is such a great park and has lived such a great life, but it's so dependent upon schedule. It's so dependent upon scheduled events, right? And what an off-leash dog park does is it doesn't rely on schedule, you know, and so part of what we've heard, and not that that's the only element alone, but Tibbetts Valley Park really has this opportunity as density happens around it to be that type of park that doesn't require a scheduled event to be activated and busy and used. So in some ways, and I think how you asked that question, you know, this activating it with a skate park on one side that again doesn't require schedule, an off-leash dog park on the other side, in a way it's beginning, I think, to show what Tibbetts with the park itself in its entirety really can become, not be so dependent upon scheduled events.
And that's one of those things too. Fences for a dog park can be pulled up or relocated, right? There's not any obstacles that you would put in for agility, can be easily moved and relocated. So as far as an expense, it's not like you're building 2 artificial turf fields, right? Where it's big money, big time, big expense. This is a little more manageable. Yeah, there might be some concrete, but given a 5-year cycle, you know, it's not that expensive to go pour a little more concrete over here for an entryway or something. So, you know, there is this flexibility about a dog park that not many park features often have. So if we do find through the master planning process that, yeah, you know, year 8, it is gonna move, we've gotten 8 years out of it and we can probably recycle the majority of it in a relocated area. You know, especially if we use volunteer efforts for the fencing and things like that, there's limited costs associated with that.
And a lot of those things actually could be put in with the understanding that maybe it is temporary, and so you don't put down a lot of concrete, maybe you put down more soft surfacing until it becomes more of a permanent, agreed upon area.
Exactly, and being that this is all kind of construction of this as well as master planning kind of happening at the same time, we'll know relatively soon in the construction process or soon thereafter what the master plan's telling us, right? Or the public output, you know, and it might be, this is the perfect home, you know, we hit it out of the park. Could be, so.
Well, the history of the park board is we had discussions previously at Tibbetts Valley Park regarding the tennis, expansion of the tennis, so the private partnership, and part of the reason we struggled with that was there was no overall plan to define whether that was something that fit in the park or not. So it probably wouldn't hurt to look at the overall plan that we have now to be sure that we're not putting something into place that in a couple months or within a year we're gonna change again too. So just as long as we cover that, part of it, because we don't wanna run into this same situation again.
Yeah.
Where we think we got it covered and then have a problem. That's my point.
That was certainly a lot different though in terms of a longer commitment and, you know, a lot of permanent structures, and whereas this
It was
is
a little
more-
different too, but I just don't wanna run over the same deal. And I know part of the issue is we did not have a plan for Tibbetts Valley Park that we could fall back on and say this fits within the plan. So maybe in the next month or two, it wouldn't hurt to look over that to be sure that we're not taking a spot that's gonna be, we're gonna regret being, or somebody's gonna.
Good
That's
point,
one of
Joe.
the reasons.
Part of the plan, it's a short, I mean, I think we've got enough time to review it, even if we need to take a look at what this.
Well, we don't know, that's a great point, and some of our
Shouldn't just let it
some
go
of our
by here.
early conversations with Development Services will be taking a look at that 1989 master plan.
Ish,
It's
yeah.
89-ish. And sort of having that, serving that as a baseline. So you're right, looking at it through that very lens that you bring up will be a
Right, because,
important work.
you know, this is a sloped area, maybe it could be made into a terraced area that could view the football or the baseball diamonds.
You're
or
gonna
something
have
like
some-
that. There's other, I just wanna be sure we don't leave that
we don't glide by it real quickly and say we're putting in something temporary, because really our hope is we're not putting in something temporary.
Yeah, that makes sense long-term.
And that's one nice thing about this site, is there, one, hadn't been much planned for it previously, and two, its geography really allows for a really unique experience at Tibbetts Valley Park, because you can get up and you can watch games from up above. You can see into the parks and you can see the mountains. It's really a cool space.
I don't have an overall problem with it, I just wanna remind ourselves that we've
Yep.
been through this path before and ran into a brick wall
In front of ourselves, yeah.
got to that spot, so be sure that we're not doing it up in the end of January with the same question again.
Anything else, Jen,
No,
on this?
that's it for Dog Park.
Any other discussion, questions on this? Okay, thanks on that one, and,
Thank you.
looks like it's time for a little Bergsma.
Like it's a verb.
It seemingly has been,
Yeah. So, and I was able to send out to all of you a week and a half ago when the agenda bill was posted to City Council. Just wanted to have a chance, now that we've had the City Council meeting and they've taken action, just to update you on this effort. It's been a very significant, substantial effort. I don't intend to go verse by verse over the agenda bill, but we'll certainly try and highlight the key elements of this opportunity and this acquisition strategy. Have a chance to answer any questions you might have, and also talk about next steps, because there really are a lot of next steps to further this strategy. So all of you are likely familiar with where the Bergsma property is located. It's 46 acres on the what ends up being the northeast corner of Cougar Mountain, as Cougar Mountain really connects to the valley floor. If we were at the skate park at Tibbetts Valley Park, we were just talking TVP, and looked due west, we would be looking at the hillside, which is the Bergsma property. These 46 acres were through the years have had multiple development proposals. Most recently, there was a 57-lot residential development that had been planned and was in the permitting process. Earlier this year, beginning in January, as that process was underway, as community feedback was certainly being expressed for the concerns of the development of that site, we were asked to explore we were asked by council and mayor to explore what acquisition might look like for a part of that site or all of that site. We began reaching out to partners. We partnered with Trust for Public Land very early in 2018 to begin that exploratory work. As the city really had a primary role of being the development reviewer, as well as development services was reviewing a development application, we wanted to be very respectful and not interfere with that effort, and so some mechanisms were set in place so that the Parks Department and TPL were working and discussing with the same developer, so they were aware of this exploratory work, while at the same time honoring their development review process and not putting those in conflict. Through some months of work, an appraisal was done. We all the while were looking at funding partners, who is out there, what other public agencies are out there that could help partner in an effort of this significance and this size. We also began looking, certainly as we were adopting the park strategic plan, as we were looking at the comprehensive plan, as we were looking at really the decades of vision that this community has had in purchasing the forested hillsides that make up the Issaquah Alps. It really became pretty apparent that an acquisition like this, an acquisition of these 46 acres really meets a lot of the strategies within the park strategic plan, met a lot of strategies within the comp plan, and also really, I think, furthered the longstanding vision that this community has had for protecting and preserving those hillsides. So as the appraisal got done, that really led to negotiations. I'll fast forward to what was presented to council on Monday night was an acquisition strategy that is ambitious, to say the least, bold, to say the least, but very doable in that we have partners. There are regional partners that are ready and interested to make this happen. And so council approved, authorized the mayor to enter into this partnership agreement. What it will do is it will buy all 46 acres of the Bergsma property. 12.5 acres, the 12.5 westernmost acres that really adjoin King County's Cougar Mountain Regional Park will be purchased and owned and managed by King County. The easternmost 33.5 acres, probably put this map up if anyone's interested in seeing it. The easternmost 33.5 acres will be purchased and managed by the city. Those 33.5 acres adjoin the existing Harvey Manning Park. So as we presented this, we see this as really an expansion of Harvey Manning Park. This allows for both expansion of that park. It allows for really connectivity and access. Imagine now the transit center at Tibbetts Valley, right across from Tibbetts Valley Park, which is just off of that. Jen's kind of using the cursor for where that is. That really on the weekends becomes a trailhead, right? Now imagine parking there, going right up through this property and into the Cougar Mountain Regional Trail System. It really creates that connectivity, that green necklace connectivity from the valley floor up into that regional park system. A lot can be accomplished through this acquisition. It's an $11 million purchase. Thankfully, that $11 million will not all be spent long-term by the city of Issaquah. We have lined up a strategy for getting regional funding through grants. Most sizably and really most strategically, King County just this year is launching a new acquisition strategy, the Land Conservation Initiative, if you're familiar with that. I think we talked about that as we were going through the park plan. A bold regional effort that King County's undertaken to look at acquisitions like this, these last remaining sort of large strategic acquisitions that accomplish and fulfill some of these long-term, decades-old goals. That grant program, we're going to apply for $5.3 million, so half of the city's purchase, half of that $10.6 million that will buy the 33.5 acres, we're going to be applying for King County Land Conservation Initiative funding just next year. We are also going to be applying for state RCO, Recreation Conservation Office funding in 2020. All told, we feel optimistic that 6.8 million of that 10.6 million can be accomplished and be received through these partners and through grant funding. So all told, when the dust settles, the city's long-term investment into this acquisition will be $3.8 million. Certainly a significant investment in itself, but certainly one that is able to accomplish this goal, and also recognizing, and I think an important thing to remember is this is an acquisition effort that is seeking to purchase property in what I've said, the 11th hour, with a development application with potential 57 lots being built on the site. And so it does, that timing lends itself to, we're paying retail price for this property. But council, like I said, authorized the mayor to proceed. I certainly would give hats off to council. This is a courageous, bold decision to make a decision like this and an action like this, and certainly puts a commitment on us as the Parks Department and myself as the Parks Director to continue to see this through, which we will. So there will be not only the grant application next year for the LCI funding, but also those other grant applications that we will be certainly adding to our work plan and working very diligently on. Certainly could mean further both either conversation here with the park board or even letters of support as we line up those grants. We have regional partners from Issaquah Alps to obviously the Save Cougar Mountain folks to Mountains to Sound Greenway that are doing backflips and are ready to lend whatever support is needed for the city to move forward on this and accomplish those grant goals. So that's the opportunity. That's the project in a nutshell. I think it certainly cements, like I said, it I think becomes our generation's opportunity to lend to the amazing work that prior generations have done in what we sort of see in the Issaquah Alps around us. So thoughts, comments, questions?
I guess my only one would be, what the vision of the future of this land would be. Would it be somewhat of an extension of Harvey Manning Park and maybe some trail access and the rest of it just green space? Is that kind of the vision for use?
Yeah, very much a forested park. So as, yes, an expansion of Harvey Manning Park, it would be an expansion with trails. There is where the 57 homes were planned, there's a relatively sort of flat plateau, benched area that could remain an amazingly wonderful forested community park that could have picnic opportunities, picnic shelter opportunities, trails. There are some pretty impressive overlooks, both to Lake Sammamish and the rest of the valley floor. So, yes, not, and I say a community park, not in the form of what Tibbetts Valley Park is going to be, just down on the valley floor, but much more of a park, a gathering space that really celebrates what it is, a forested, wooded hillside. And really that gateway, if you think about it, from the valley floor up into the Cougar Mountain Regional Park.
So is there trail access from Harvey Manning to Cougar?
Yes, there's one small one. This creates the impetus and the opportunity to even do that more so.
And that's great. And are we in agreement then with the developer in terms of the term, or, I mean, have we signed anything? Papers?
Yes. So I sped through that agenda bill really fast, but yes, there is an option agreement in place that has an agreed upon price and full 46-acre purchase. So we are, with the council action on Monday night, we are proceeding towards a closing of this property in February.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seems like a round of applause needs to happen. I'm pretty impressed. I mean,
Really?
congrats
Same.
on all of your effort. I know you guys have done a ton to put this forward and for the city council to move forward. It's really exciting. So, good one.
Just out of curiosity, what's the 12.5 acres? What's the county going to use that for? Do you have any idea? Or?
So this adjoins their regional park, which is hundreds of acres. Yeah, so trails, similarly, that is a really steep, that site isn't necessarily steep, but there's a ravine Interestingly enough, if you look at that lot line where the blue and the green are, there's a ravine that sort of runs right down that area. And so it's a fairly isolated 12.5 acres in itself. King County has a trailhead on Newport Way that is, again, probably just off the side of that map. And so it's just further trails, connectivity, preservation of the hillside.
Oh, that existing trail is not within that blue section now.
No, that was private property. There were no current trails on there.
And I like to be very optimistic that this is all gonna go through, but just if for some reason, you know, the way grants are, if grants don't come like they are expected, what happens? Is there another alternative to being able to maintain this under city ownership?
Maintain it under city ownership? Yeah, well, yes. So we have probably the biggest rock, really the cornerstone of this funding strategy, along with the city's contribution, is the King County Land Conservation Initiative grant that we'll be applying for next year. That'll be through, King County has set that up. It's gonna go through their Conservation Futures application process. It'll be a separate bucket of funding that this project will competing for roughly $25 million of separate funding. Should that grant program, should it evaporate? Should it go away? Should we not be successful in it? We do have options, and these are options that we certainly spelled out Monday night at the council meeting. At that moment in time, without any type of conservation easements on this site, much like any other conservation group would do, is it does these acquisitions and needs to get partners to fund things and not all at the same time. The city could consider selling a portion of this to recoup some of its costs. Certainly not the intent of why we're pursuing this. The intent is preservation and conservation, but there are ways that the city could mitigate its impacts. I can say that we are more than 50-50 optimistic. We are very, very optimistic of how a project of this size and scale will measure up to the criteria that this bond funding, this is going to compete very, very, very well. The Conservation Futures Committee, who reviews all the applications, they're familiar with this site. They've seen this site. I've had individual conversations with a number of them about this site and project, so a lot of that groundwork we'll continue to do.
And the county already has those funds, right? Because the public already approved that, right? Conservation money?
Yeah, for the money that we're gonna be competing for next year, yes, there's funding already in place. It doesn't require any new taxing. Yep.
Just curious, that's just my ignorance, but the 12.5 acres in Harvey Manning, that little white block of land there, is that privately owned currently,
No.
or what is?
King
me pull that
County owns that as well.
Are
Oh,
you
they
talking
do?
about this one here?
No, the
No.
next one up.
This one?
Right there, yeah.
Yeah.
Between.
King County and some of those other adjoining,
Oh, they already own
yeah,
it?
yes.
Okay, so it's already open space, or, okay, got it.
And just this
That's city
portion
property,
is
too.
also city property here. This is community facilities where the water tank is. So,
Yeah, so,
and
Really
if I may
excited.
add to Brad's comment too about grants, oftentimes what happens when you apply for a grant, the timing of one of the grants would come in next year. That can also then be the seed money for other grants, and oftentimes can set you up to get more money than even what you initially anticipate because of having such a sizable partner to go in as part of that grant funding. Really makes the attractiveness of the project rank even higher. So we're really setting ourselves up well for these grant applications. should this first one out of the gate really land itself.
Which means that the net from the city could even be less than the 3 point
Potentially.
some if you get additional ones?
Could be.
Potentially.
Shoot for the first 6.8.
Yes.
We're gonna, like any good goal setter, we're gonna aim high. We're gonna aim
Yes.
high, and if it comes in better, but, yeah, it was nice to also be able to share with council, as they were asking some really good questions about what our success rate has been, and being able to point to a number of, again, the investments that have been made over the decades and the success of grants and the success of leveraging grants, and making that very same point to council that grants beget grants, right? The funding strategy, just like this one, is multiple grants. And you can be really successful in that because it shows leveraged partners. It shows that ability that as you become successful in grants, you become more attractive to other grant funders. So here we go. A lot more work ahead, but really an exciting opportunity. And I would say hats off to you too as a Parks Board. The work we've done in adopting the Park Strategic Plan, in crafting that Park Strategic Plan, and telling that big picture story gives context. It gives context for really big, audacious, bold opportunities like this. So, well done.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Excellent work. Anything else on that one? If not, we'll move on to Gilman Boulevard Framework Plan. I guess Jennifer's going to do a little bit of a tee-up for that, and then we'll talk
Yeah.
about it for briefly.
So as you may recall, at our October meeting, Brianne Ross, a senior transportation engineer in our Public Works Department, came and did a presentation. She was looking at, she's working on the Gilman Boulevard project, basically some of the framework for the future design process, and did a presentation. Over the past year or so, she's been working very closely with not only the community, doing surveys, open house meetings, but also business owners and all people of interest that have vested interest down along Gilman corridor. Through the consultant work, they had come up with the framework for the design, talking about some of the major issues that they would want to see addressed as they start moving forward through the design process. At the end of our meeting, you all had many questions that you asked her, and she had taken some notes to help inform the letter that is before you, but she had asked if the park board would be willing to submit a letter of recommendation to help support the framework, which are the basic guidelines for the Gilman project. There's a funding request in for scoping for next year to be able to start detailed design for the Gilman corridor project. So the letter of recommendation that is before you, similar letters of recommendation have come from the other committees, Planning Policy Commission and Development? No, not Development Commission, who's the other? I just spaced out.
Hey, you're the master. We rely on you on that.
I know, and I forgot, so, excuse me. But she's been to other committees as well. But Parks Board, being we have vested interest, ownership, maintenance as far as trees, pathways, how this interfaces with the Green Necklace, our Park Strategic Plan, you know, intersections, like how to deal with the 3 trails crossing was really important as far as our comments, as well as feedback response from the community. Other things about linear park, how that could fit in there. Maybe it's not always all areas. You mentioned, you know, maybe we look at some of the transportation routes being on other spaces. So this is really just giving support at a high level for the basic framework to be able to begin moving forward on the more detailed design, knowing what issues Parks has vested interest in, being the street trees, ongoing maintenance, succession planning, finding a new location for the edible landscapes, how it's going to intersect with our trail crossings, our future green necklace walkways, and creating those green park spaces that we all like, see out on Gilman Boulevard. So, with that, staff has given your feedback based upon the meeting, and I went back and reviewed, crafted the letter, and with that, I'm gonna probably turn it over to Brad to see if he has any comments on it.
No, I think it talks pretty general and, really kind of on 3 specific issues in terms of tree succession, multimodal transportation, and the Green Necklace linear park concept. I mean, I think all of those is what relates to the Parks Department and the Park Board. Again, I don't think there's anything in here that's really that specific. It's pretty general. It gives more opportunity and flexibility to get more specific later as the plan develops. I think all we're doing at this point is saying that we're in agreement that at least from Parks' perspective, these considerations that they're giving within this plan are appropriate. So, anybody have any comments?
I have one comment.
Or revisions?
Not on the letter specifically, but just a general comment. The Gilman Boulevard was redeveloped as what you see today in 1986. At that point in time, the Park Department had a very limited input into the design and construction of what is there today. So I would just hope that the Park Department has a more input than we had 32 years ago, and we come up with a better product. Because there are some deficiencies there that we've been living with for quite some time. So, and I have nothing but confidence that you will do that.
Deficiencies we can't see, i.e. irrigation.
Well, if you work for park maintenance, you'd see it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I have nothing but confidence that we'll have more input.
I do as well. Any other comments about it? Ruben?
In reference to relocating the edible, is that a possibility? Okay, I'm just curious, given how old those trees are, I have no idea about the root structure, but.
Yeah,
Well, it wouldn't be relocating those existing trees, it'd be
Oh.
relocating where an edible
So I'm trying to figure
tree.
out. So,
Creating a new orchard.
New orchard, okay.
Yeah, because a lot of those are getting to their
Yeah, that's what I'm
lifespan,
thinking, yeah.
and are diseased or have issues, and the health of trying to relocate them, especially with all the utilities, would be very challenging.
And in some respects, I think they're a little bit hazardous, in terms of having them in a center median for people to be walking around and picking fruit and in the midst of traffic. And so I think having a special place for edibles would be a real positive for the future.
But yeah, it'd be new plant material.
Chris?
Will there be future opportunities to provide input and
Yes, as this goes through the design, there will be much more public engagement as the design starts unfolding. There's a lot of complexities, a lot of layers with this, and it will be coming out to the public. So I'm sure the park board as well will get informational updates as well as that process.
but opportunity to add, suggestions?
Yep,
I mean, this is very general.
yes. Well, that's where the planning is right now, is at the higher level, right?
It speaks very generally, but there's some specifics that really need to be addressed. So,
Well, I think it opens the door for us to have some collaboration, in reference to kind of what Al was talking about. I think this shows that they want to have feedback and input from the park board. So I think it's a good thing. We're talking many years to really put this together. This could be a 20-year plan or something, or 10-year at least.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's not a cheap one, but it's also as new development comes in,
Right.
it's hopeful that we can then start informing new development as it occurs up and down Gilman Boulevard as well. So there's ways that this could start getting implemented even before the city's portion of this is funded and ready to be implemented.
Well, the plan itself will probably be in place by the end of next year, won't it?
No, I think it's gonna take a little longer
Longer
than
than
that to
that?
get to full construction drawings, yeah. Couple year process.
Couple years.
But the thought is to have that, have the vision of the corridor, have those drawings so that as proposed development is happening in central Issaquah, those investments, those frontage investments are moving towards the desired vision. Yep.
Kind of like the park strategic plan in a way, same concept, put the plan in place
Big
first.
picture, bite by bite.
Right.
Yep, exactly. So the request is, if we can get board approval to submit this letter?
You want a motion on this?
We do. If there's any more questions or discussion, let's do that first. I'm not seeing anything, so if not, let's have a motion to approve the letter as it's presented.
I make a motion that we approve the letter as presented and move it forward to the city council.
Would you like to second that?
I'll second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's approved, thank you. I will sign the letter tonight, and we'll get it into the proper hands. So, good, we're doing great on time. You need a breather, or you got something?
Why don't you go first? You
Okay.
good?
I think that's becoming a trend. I think we're gonna need to shift this just a little bit. We'll do that in the future. So on my report, I just got a couple things. Some of them is just kind of notification of things happening. One thing I wanted to just point out is, one of the real advantages of actually having our meetings recorded now is it creates an opportunity for everyone on the board that if you, for whatever reason, are not able to attend, it gives you the opportunity to see what occurred in the meeting that you missed. And I would really encourage you to watch those on YouTube if you do miss a meeting, so that you continually are staying plugged in with things that are moving forward. I mean, we've really kind of made some changes about a year ago or so, and in some respects, something that happened in the past maybe kind of triggered this, that it's a lot nicer to not be surprised when we're confronted with having to make recommendations. And so intentionally, meetings are now designed and agendas are designed, to first have the I for information, and sometimes that might be a meeting or two or three, followed by a D for discussion so that it's getting closer to making a recommendation, followed by an A for action, meaning we're going to be voting on something. So, and if you miss any of those meetings, it's hard when it gets to the time of actually, making a recommendation or approval of a recommendation. If you miss something, you're kind of maybe not plugged in as much. So I really see the recordings as being a real advantage for the board as well as the community, and encourage you to take advantage of that, to stay plugged in even if you miss one. Couple of notifications I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. I've mentioned coexisting with carnivores before. It's actually a 3-year program that the Woodland Park Zoo has a substantial grant and is working with the city of Issaquah, and specifically Issaquah Parks. And that process is continuing to move forward. I've been attending all of their meetings. I'm actually now becoming a team member within that unit. It's not too late if you still want to get involved in the process. The next meeting that is going to occur is tomorrow evening at 7:30 at the Rogue Brew House. That's basically, we're still in the kind of planning development stage of this program to put teams together. And that's kind of what that meeting tomorrow night is going to be about. The other thing that's actually developing, and I applied for this as well, is they're going to be doing a camera trapping process. And that's actually going to be directly in collaboration with Issaquah Parks. There's going to be locations set up on Cougar Mountain, Highlands, and Tiger Mountain. Those are the 3 areas. Teams of 4 people are going to be selected, 4 to 6 people are going to be selected to cover each one of those 3 areas. If you are interested in becoming involved in that, I would encourage you to probably just reach out to me, and then I can put you in touch with Dakota, who runs the program for Woodland Park Zoo. Essentially, what's going to happen is once teams are formed, there's going to be 2 days of training in February for this, and then the program will actually start beginning in March and run through November of next year. And essentially, your commitment, if you would want to join into this camera trapping team, would be about 5 hours per month in a variety of sources, whether it's data management or actual field work, which is what I'm actually interested in, to actually go and monitor the traps and all of that. So I think it'll really be a terrific thing for the city. Eventually, a lot of this visuals will end up getting published in some of the Issaquah communication, and actually will also be used for a variety of other communications around the country that Woodland Park Zoo is kind of plugged into this program. So it'll be kind of neat to actually get an awful lot more wildlife visuals. It's something that Matt has done in the past, but really has not had the capacity really to probably do as much of it as this program will enable. And so, in addition to, educating the community about our wildlife, this will really give an opportunity for the people to really visually, see what we really going on here around our hillsides. And there's a lot going on around our hillsides. People just don't know it. And the traps will really give an opportunity to see it. So, in any event, I just wanted to highlight that opportunity, and something more on that will come in the future. Something else that's going on this week, I don't know that I'm going to have a chance to see the whole thing, but part of it, I think. Wednesday afternoon and evening at the fish hatchery, there's going to be a presentation for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. The new director is actually going to be at the hatchery from 4 to 5:30. They're actually doing a wildlife presentation. And then from 6:30 to 8:30 is actually going to be an open house, which I assume is just kind of mingling around and meeting the new director. The new director essentially is going to really talk an awful lot about a variety of different things in terms of what the intentions are from Washington Fish and Wildlife, and in terms of budgeting, what their effort is in terms of managing fish and wildlife around the state, and somewhat within our area too. So that's it's all free, and actually there is a registration, I think, but I don't know how adhered to that fish will be. So like I said, that's 4 to 5:30 Wednesday afternoon for the presentation, 6:30 to 8:30 Wednesday evening for the open house. And that's actually all I have, other than happy holidays.
It is December, isn't it?
It is.
Wow. My turn?
Your turn.
A couple of highlights and updates I wanted to share with you. You'd heard earlier in the meeting, City Council adopted the 2019 budget last Monday night. Some highlights in terms of what that means for us as a department. A couple of new operational items were added to the budget within our park operations team. In that 2019 budget is an additional park maintenance worker. As we look at really continuing to take on and manage all of the open space land, the park land, the trails that we have, that additional staff person will be a huge help. Also in the operating budget for next year, the senior center. Really good conversation with City Council as we went through the budget process. They supported the administrations are, and the mayor's recommendation for transitioning to long-term city operation of the senior center. So we will be shaking the interim tag off of that operation at the senior center, and will be beginning next year the long-term operators of the senior center. So that was news met with high enthusiasm by the patrons of the senior center, which is always a nice compliment. Brian knows all too well with the work that we've done down there and the work of the senior center staff. They've been terrific. On the capital side of the budget, if you remember our October meeting, I highlighted what our proposed capital requests were that were in the budget. Those were all approved. I won't go through them point by point, but you can certainly go back and look at the October minutes, as well as that presentation, and see really a number of projects that are going to certainly keep us active and busy as we head into 2019. Off-leash dog park, we touched on that already. A number of master planning efforts. Tibbetts Valley Park. We also are going to be initiating a master plan of Memorial Park and Depot Park and Pedestrian Park. If you remember, those parks were really seen as a high priority coming out of the park strategic plan. Another planning effort we're going to embark on next year is really the first visioning as the Gilman corridor is happening. Imagine a corridor plan for this Issaquah Creek corridor. If you remember, a big part of our park strategic plan was that anchor connection, that north-south connection of park properties and creek properties from Lake Sammamish on the north through the state park, all the way down to Squaw Valley Park, which is our southern border. So they're really beginning to put some planning to what that looks like from activation of parks, what that looks like in terms of beginning to piece together the acquisitions that have been made over the really over the decades by the community and by the city. 2018, as we're saying goodbye to 2018 and jumping into 2019, it's certainly going to mean a shift for us in terms of that work plan. As I've done in years past at the January meeting, I'll plan on bringing I'll try and encapsulate our work plan in sort of a one-pager that'll really give you really those big picture projects that we have planned and will likely be work plan items that we'll see and be working with you as the park board. Can't say goodbye to 2018 without certainly recognizing the big year that it was. I will also at the January meeting have a quarterly report that'll look at each of the divisions in our department and some of the great work done by staff and by teams, some of the new approaches and new processes that we've been undertaking. That'll be exciting to share. But really just looking at all in this year, we cut a ribbon on 2 new synthetic turf fields, pad 1 at Central Park. That might seem like 3 years ago. That was just earlier this year. And what a hit those have been to the community. Adopting the park strategic plan, completing that. If you remember, we also undertook the green necklace. And really putting some further definition around the green necklace. That was work done this year, and certainly with your tremendous support there. The new flooring at the community center has been certainly what I've heard is a big hit. I know users have been very appreciative, working out some of the kinks with what it means program-wise, but all good things, as we say in our department, right? All good things. All good, yeah. But just some great efforts this year, and really to be commended. I can't say enough. The department is really comprised of some very passionate, very caring employees who really love this community, and it certainly shows in the work that gets done. We're going to be adding to the team in 2019. I'm happy to announce we're going to have a second park planner that's going to be coming on board and be working with Jennifer on this rather robust work plan. Shantae I'm gonna butcher her last name if I try and say it.
Florani?
Florani, I believe, yes. Shantae, if you're listening, sorry if I butchered that. She'll be starting January 2nd. We had just a terrific pool of applicants, great interview process. She's not only a landscape architect, an arborist, has great experience both in private and public sector, coming to us from WashDOT, where she's recently been sort of the regional landscape architect with all the work that they have going on. So really, I just think experience, excitement to sink her teeth into this work that we've got going on here in Issaquah. An item I'm going to kind of put out as a little tickler. One of our work plan items, if you remember when we adopted the park plan, updating, taking a look and reformatting the goals and policies. If you remember, council asked that we do that within the year. So did the Planning Policy Commission. As Jennifer and I are looking at the work plan for park planning, we want to get right on that in 2019. We think that's one of the items we want really early in the first quarter. Just food for thought. I would love to, I guess, throw out the idea of perhaps an ad hoc committee, a smaller group of you that could work really closely with us on that goals and policies reformatting. That, of course, would come back to the full board, but maybe it's a way that we could accomplish that focused work with some of you that might be interested in that. So something to think about over the holidays. I'll be talking obviously further with you, Brad, on what that might look like, but might be something that you'll all want to consider in our January meeting. And lastly, I mentioned this at the October meeting. Watch out for the staples. This is a sort of a replication of what a postcard that's going to be going out in January. I'll pass these around. That'll go to all residents and businesses, all property owners. What this is really a report on the 2013 park bond. With the completion of the synthetic fields at Central Park, really the work of that park bond has been completed, and this will be an opportunity to really be transparent with the community and let them know where that $10 million investment went. I think there's some really good news that's worth this community celebrating, and that $10 million leveraged some additional grant dollars. So we had roughly $16 million of work that was done and completed with that effort. So this will be going out as a postcard, just sharing with the community and giving a real thank you for that investment. It's done a lot for the park system. So
That's all spent now?
it's all spent. Yep. Yep. So I too say happy holidays. Enjoy. Let's jump into 2019. More fun.
Good job, park staff.
Yes,
Thank you.
very good. Any other business announcements, comments? If not, we're adjourned.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
everybody.